Your story is a work of fiction. All of these coaches and inspirational speakers are telling us to own our own stories, to rewrite the endings, or be the authors, be the main character energy. And I think that a lot of people are like, that kind of stresses me out. Like, I don't even like writing a story to begin with. Why do I need to write my own? I barely am just like making it through right now. I don't need to add another thing of narrating my own story to my plate. And this is the Rich Life Realization Podcast. This is episode number 6. And today we're going to be talking about stories, narratives. And no guest today. It's going to be me. We're going to have a beautiful conversation, and you can always add in comments to respond back to me or reach out to me. We'll talk about stories, about narratives, because when I was in college, I fell in love with stories. I did the creative writing for my undergraduate, and that's so much fun. I'm reading short stories, writing short stories. I was a bit of a snob. I would say, oh yes, I'm reading James Joyce and Dostoevsky, and I had my snobbish reading. I was very heady. Oh, look at that! And I wasn't reading as much for enjoyment, but I loved it. It was so much fun. I love learning about stories, and we have the story art that you learned when you were probably in second or third grade. The story arc of rising action and the conflict, and then crisis, and then falling action and denouement. And stories are powerful. They contain meaning and essence of who we are. And we can start to use that metaphor of the story as our life, that our lives are stories. And that next step then is those coaches are saying, oh, be your main character, be your narrator, be your own hero in the story. And yeah, what if you didn't have to? We'll explore parts of that today, because stories, they tell us a lot about ourselves, and we create stories all the time in our minds. Stories about what something means. Stories about the person who cut us off in traffic, that bastard. And we make up a whole story about how they're a jerk, and they've always been a jerk, and they're speeding off to go do jerk things. And we have stories about our loved ones. It ranges from people who we've never met to people who we care so deeply about. And those stories about our loved ones, oh my gosh, some of them can break our hearts, and a lot of the time we're kind of making them up. Like when our loved ones are mad at us or kind of have that little edge to their voice, right? Well, we're probably making up what's going on with them because we're saying, oh, I did something to hurt them, to offend them. And maybe that was the case, but also maybe usually there's something else going on entirely. Work was stressful, or they're just been thinking and worrying and stressed about something else, and that distracted them, and they have that edge to the voice, and we read into that. And that's how a lot of our challenges in our relationships start to happen, because we make up stories. And we also make up stories about ourselves, stories about our past and what it means for us. We create these narratives that are very real. They're real in our minds, that they can hurt us. They really can. They can make us feel deep pain. And we can have these stories of how amazing we are, our biggest triumphs. But I think most often the case is that we have stories where we aren't good enough, a story of where we are unworthy. Something happened and we ascribe meaning to that shows that we're unworthy because of what happened. Our past traumas. We make connections that aren't necessarily the case and make it about ourselves. And that causes deep pain, deep emotion. We also know those people who they have a victim story. Everything is a complaint, that they are victims of the world and of circumstance and of their families and their people around them that maybe are acting like jerk faces. Maybe, yeah. Or situations that just, there's stories of situations that just recycle over and over, and we tell ourselves over and over, and we tell other people over and over and over. And we want to start to see through these stories that we're telling, because like a good story, you can get absorbed in the narrative of your own story. When we pick up a book like The Hobbit, okay, it's one of my favorites, so or your favorite story, I don't know what you're into, Twilight, or if you're listening to this, it's probably not Twilight, but no hate, you can enjoy your sparkly vampires. And I've never even read it, so maybe I need to give it a chance. But we get absorbed. We're like, lose ourselves in the stories, in the narrative of the stories that's happening. And it's made real in our minds, these squiggly lines on a page. Daniel Magnuson, I was talking with him, and he talked about these squiggly lines on the page then become in our minds this reality. And we then shut the book and we can go about our day. But we can't shut the book on our own lives. We can't like walk away. You're kind of in the narrative of the story while it's being written, and you can't really turn it off. I mean, of course, there are ways that you can, and not to get too deep into that, but when our life ends, yes, the storybook will close, and it opened when our life began. But we're in it. Otherwise, we can't help it. And we can become absorbed by our own stories, the drama, the tragedy, the the beauty. And it's interesting because I talk about how you can start to read in between the lines, that our stories are written on the pages of love. Okay, now this is what I mean by that. That there is a force that's kind of that container that gives us the space for the story to unfold, to come forth. That you can call it consciousness or mind or creative intelligence. That there is this life within us that our stories are written on. And that's the paper. That's what's underneath the surface. What if that were true? Wouldn't that be so cool? That would be so beautiful. That we would have underneath our story. And guess what? It doesn't matter what the story is to the page. It could be the most atrocious, traumatic experience, and it doesn't do anything to the page. It can also be the most beautiful story, and it still doesn't matter to the page. The love is underneath that. Love and life. And life, because it's the same force that makes our heart beat and our cuts heal and our lungs breathe. It guides where it guides our lives in a beautiful way if we let it. And that's what I want to talk about too, because when I studied in college, I learned about perspective, a point of view of the narrative, because there are lots of different choices of points of view that you can use as an author. There's first person point of view, which uses the words I, and it uses I for the narrator, like I walked to the mall. It's a story about me. That's first person point of view. And then there's second person point of view. He, she, second I think is you. I think that's right. And then third person point of view is he, she. So second person would be like, you went to the store, and that's addressing the reader. Then the third person point of view is he and she. So those are some of the options. Now we experience our lives in the first person point of view, but we can write our lives in that point of view. That's totally fine. But the thing about first person is that it's limited. It's limited to only the thoughts and the experiences that are happening directly in our intellectual minds. It is a limited, and it can be a very powerful point of view when authors use it. And it's very narrow. It's there. You're seeing for what it is. There's not really too much nuance. Of course, the author can add nuance using a narrator that is not believable, an unreliable narrator, and maybe we're unreliable narrators sometimes in our own lives. Now, this is the interesting part. You can also write in he, she. Now, there's more options if you do it that way. There's a third person limited perspective, which is limited to the thoughts of the characters' minds. And then there's a more open point of view where they can get into maybe some of the other characters' heads. It can switch characters from character to character and switch their point of view. That's kind of cool. Then there's this omniscient point of view that is kind of this all-knowing. It can know any and every detail about the character, about their lives, about their histories. It can know what's going to happen in the future. That would be nice, right? Or what's going to happen what's happened in the past. It knows things that the character doesn't know. Now, of course, we can't know everything. We can't have that limitless point of view, at least maybe intellectually. But the cool thing is we can let that part of us that I was talking about earlier narrate our lives. And that part of us has maybe not that complete omniscient point of view, but it has a knowing. It has an understanding, not an intellectual understanding, but an eternal understanding of how to heal our cuts. I wouldn't know the first step of healing my own cut. I let it happen. My body takes care of it for me. And if I tried to do it, I'd probably mess it up. If I had to concentrate on it and say, oh, heal. Aha, it's working. It take up my whole day. And when we try to become the narrators, it takes up a lot of mental space. When we try to force things in the world and force our story, we can do it. Yeah. But it takes up so much energy and an intention and awareness and motivation. What if we didn't have to write it that way? what if we could let that other part of us, the inner knowing, the innate wisdom within, call it whatever you want, that inner wellspring, what if that could be the author of our lives? Well, that would be game changing. That would take a lot off of our plates, actually. And then we could kind of just be a character and play around, and we'd realize that our stories were fictional, that we're making our stories up in our heads continually, that the thoughts that we have are just stories, and we can start to see through them, and they don't feel as real to us anymore, and they don't feel as scary. Even our emotions, they're just coming from our thoughts. They too don't feel as absorbed, like we're in the story, and oh my gosh, it doesn't feel as scary. Because we know that what's underneath, what's actually authoring our story, the pages on which it's being written. I'll say it again because I absolutely love it. And it just rings a bell in my heart. It rings the bells in in here. Your story is written on the pages of love. Isn't that so freaking cool? And if that's true, then, and we can let that same love write our story, then it's like a fountain. It feeds on itself. It is continual and constant. And this is kind of the interesting thing, is that we have the ability to be our own authors and to force it and to try and use our intellect to write our stories in the exact way that we want to. We have that ability. And that author and that page will just say, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you're always writing on love, but that author will step aside. It's generous. It says, oh yeah, go right ahead. It doesn't judge you. It says, no, please, after you. And I think when we do that, we can do it. It's frustrating and one of the most challenging experiences, because no matter what we try to write, it's not going to turn out the way that we want it to, and that's frustrating in and of itself. And it's so much simpler if we can kind of give up our pen. Let the pen go to that other part of ourselves. And you don't have to, but try it out. Give it a try. Even just for a moment. and see what comes. I think you'll be really surprised and astounded, because I know that I am every single time. Every single time I even just give a little bit to that author, it just blows me away. Okay. That's what I have to say about stories. In the next one I do by myself, I'll talk about your story versus the story. So that'll be coming soon. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you.